hold your hand up in front of your face right now. Look at it. Whatever color it is, pale enough to glow in a dark room, dark enough to vanish in one, or somewhere in the endless middle, that color is not a coincidence. It is not a decoration. It is not something your body picked the way you pick a shirt in the morning. That color is a receipt, a printed record of a deal your ancestors cut with the sun tens of thousands of years ago. And the sun, just so we're clear, negotiated like a tyrant. It never blinked, it never compromised, and it has never once felt bad about any of it. So, how did we get here? How did a species that started out entirely, completely, no exceptions dark-skinned, end up with people so pale they sunburn walking to their car? The honest answer pulls in vitamin D, skin cancer, a tiny molecule called folate, the African equator, the ice-locked north, a single fish in a pet store, a tribe that broke every rule, and a star sitting 93 million miles away that started this whole mess and feels absolutely nothing about it. Let's walk it back. Run the human family tree all the way down to the roots, past your grandparents, past the people in the history books, past the cave painters, past the first cities. Keep going. About 300,000 years ago, when our species first showed up in Africa, every human being alive was dark-skinned. Not most of them, not a comfortable majority, every single one. There were no pale people, there were no fair populations tucked away somewhere. The very idea of light skin in humans did not exist yet. It hadn't been invented, because evolution had no reason to invent it. So sit with that for a second. Whoever you are, wherever your family is from, your founding ancestors looked nothing like a huge fraction of the people walking around today. Which means, somewhere between then and now, something happened. Something pushed hard enough, for long enough, that it physically rewrote how entire populations looked across 3 continents. To understand what that something was, we first have to be honest about what skin actually is, because most people have no idea. A lot of people treat skin like wrapping paper, the bag your organs came in, the surface you moisturize and otherwise ignore. But skin is an organ, your single largest one, and it is running dozens of jobs at once, most of which you will never notice and never thank it for. One of those jobs might be the most important of all, standing between your DNA and the sun's ultraviolet radiation. UV light is the invisible energy the sun fires at the earth every second of every day, and it is not on your side. UV snaps chemical bonds, it damages DNA, it triggers mutations. And when enough of those mutations stack up in the wrong cells over enough years, they become cancer, including melanoma, one of the most aggressive skin cancers there is. Here's where color enters the story. The pigment that darkens skin is called melanin, and melanin is, in the most literal biological sense, sunscreen, a built-in, always-on, never clocks out UV filter. More melanin, darker skin, and the more UV gets stopped before it reaches the deep layers where your DNA lives. Dark skin was never just a look, it was armor. So in Africa, directly under some of the most punishing UV on the planet, evolution selected for that armor with brutal speed. More melanin meant better protected DNA, fewer dangerous mutations, longer lives, and, in the only currency evolution actually counts, more surviving children. Natural selection isn't an artist. It has no taste, no vision, no opinion about beauty. It is a cold, patient algorithm, running one question over and over across billions of bodies. Did this trait help you live long enough to reproduce? Yes, keep it. No, delete it. Under the equatorial sun, dark skin was a screaming, unanimous yes every single generation. Now the story turns because UV doesn't stop at the surface. It reaches into your bloodstream and attacks something tiny, invisible, and absolutely critical. Something that, destroyed at the wrong moment in the wrong person, can quietly end a pregnancy before anyone even knows it began. That something is folate, a form of vitamin B9, drifting through your blood doing essential maintenance. And before you tune out at vitamin B, understand why this matters. Folate is what builds the neural tube in an early embryo, the structure that becomes the brain and the spinal cord. If there isn't enough folate in those first few weeks, often before a woman even knows she's pregnant, the neural tube can fail to close. The results are devastating: severe birth defects and miscarriage. And UV radiation destroys folate. It breaks the molecules apart in the blood. In a sun-soaked world with no clothing, no shade, no sunscreen, that destruction was constant and unavoidable. So now, there were 2 completely separate reasons dark skin was non-negotiable under the African sun. 1, melanin shields DNA, cutting cancer risk. 2, melanin protects folate, protecting the next generation. 2 different threats, 1 pigment that solved both. In Africa, dark skin wasn't merely useful. It was a requirement for the species to continue. Think about what we've established. Dark skin blocks cancer. It guards folate. It had been stress-tested and refined for hundreds of thousands of years. If evolution left reviews, dark skin would have 5 stars and a wall of glowing testimonials. So why did the humans who left Africa get lighter and lighter? The answer is one of the most elegant and merciless trade-offs in all of biology. Somewhere between 70,000 and 100,000 years ago, groups of humans began drifting out of Africa. There was no announcement, no grand departure, just generations nudging a little farther than their parents, into the Middle East, up into Europe, across Asia, eventually into the Americas. And as they pushed north, their world quietly changed underneath them. The sun got weaker, not the actual sun. That nuclear furnace stayed exactly as indifferent as ever. But at higher latitudes, sunlight strikes the Earth at a shallow angle and claws through far more atmosphere to get there. UV gets filtered out. Days shrink. Winters stretch long and dark. The sky stays gray for months. And suddenly, the dark skin that had been perfect for the equator became a liability. Not because of cancer, which was now a much smaller threat, and not because of folate, which UV could no longer destroy in the same quantities. The problem was something else entirely. Something that almost never gets the credit it deserves. Your skin makes vitamin D. When UVB light hits a compound in your skin called 7-dehydrocholesterol, it kicks off a chemical reaction that manufactures it. Your skin is, quite literally, a solar panel, using sunlight as raw fuel to build an essential molecule. And vitamin D is not optional, not a little. It is load-bearing for the entire human body. Vitamin D controls how you absorb calcium and phosphorus. Without it, calcium slips right past you no matter how much you eat, and bones can't mineralize properly. In children, severe deficiency causes rickets, bones that soften and bend, legs that bow outward, skulls that flatten, growth that stalls. In adult women, deficiency can soften the bones of the pelvis, which turns childbirth from dangerous into potentially fatal. And it doesn't stop at the skeleton. Vitamin D shortfalls weaken the immune system, sap muscle strength, and have been linked to mood and cognitive decline. Run out of it, and several of your body's systems start failing at once. Now drop a dark-skinned person into Northern Europe 40,000 years ago. Their melanin is superb. Their skin blocks UV beautifully. A gift in Africa, a curse here. Because in that gray, low-light north, the melanin is now blocking the very UV they desperately need to make vitamin D. Skin can't tell dangerous UV I should stop from precious UV I need to capture. It just blocks. So vitamin D production craters, calcium absorption drops, bones go soft, children get rickets, women die in labor, the population thins. In a world with no supplements, no fortified food, no doctors, dark skin in the far north wasn't an inconvenience. It was a slow death sentence, spread across generations. So that same cold algorithm started selecting against it. Random mutations that dialed melanin down, instead of being wiped out, began to spread. Because people with slightly lighter skin made slightly more vitamin D, grew slightly stronger bones, and had slightly more surviving children. Lighter, lighter, lighter. Generation after generation. Not because anyone chose it. Because at that latitude, with that sun, lighter skin simply kept more people alive. The algorithm hadn't changed. The inputs had flipped. Here's the catch, and it's the kind of thing that should make you trust the whole theory more, not less. If less sun means lighter skin, or an iron law, then the people living at the very top of the world, in the Arctic, where the sun barely clears the horizon for months, should be the palest humans on Earth. They aren't. The Inuit and other Arctic peoples have brownish, distinctly non-pale skin, despite living farther north than almost anyone. For decades, this looked like a problem for the vitamin D story. It's actually the proof. Skin color was never really about latitude. It was about the vitamin D budget, and there's more than one way to fill it. The traditional Arctic diet is one of the most vitamin D-rich diets in human history. Fatty fish, seal, whale, liver, marine fat by the bucketload. These people were swimming in dietary vitamin D. Their skin never had to lighten to chase what little sun there was, because they were eating their daily dose. On top of that, they descend from East Asian ancestors who arrived in the Arctic relatively recently, and snow throws UV right back up at you, raising exposure from below. No selection pressure to lighten, so they never did. The exception doesn't break the rule. It is the rule, stated more precisely. Lighten only when your diet leaves you no other way to get vitamin D. Here's the part that genuinely surprises people. Skin color isn't run by a single switch. There's no dark gene and light gene with one beating the other. Pigmentation is polygenic, controlled by dozens of genes working together. But one of them stands so far above the rest that it has a name worth knowing. And the way scientists found it is almost too on the nose. In 2005, a geneticist studying a common pet store zebrafish, the pale golden variety, tracked its washed-out color down to a single gene. Out of curiosity, the team checked the human version of that same gene. It's called SLC24A5, and what they found rewired the field. In Europeans, the gene differs from the African and East Asian version by a single letter of DNA, one nucleotide, swapping one amino acid, the variant nicknamed A111T. That one tiny change accounts for somewhere between a quarter and a third of the entire skin tone difference between West Africans and Europeans. The ancestral, darker version dominates across Africa and East Asia. The pale variant is found in roughly 99% of modern Europeans, almost completely fixed, a continent's worth of fair skin traces in large part back to one mutation that a pet fish helped us discover. And here's the kicker. Europeans and East Asians both ended up much lighter than equatorial Africans. But they largely got there with different genes. Same destination, completely different molecular roads. What biologists call convergent evolution. Evolution found the same answer more than once, from scratch. And when nature keeps reinventing the same trait, that's about the loudest signal biology can send that the trait genuinely matters for survival. Want to see just how strong that pressure was? Look at a completely different human species. Neanderthals lived in Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years, far longer than we have, under the same weak northern sun. When scientists pulled DNA from a 43,000-year-old Neanderthal in Spain and a 50,000-year-old one in Italy, they found a mutation in a pigmentation gene called MC1R that points to pale skin and red hair. But here's the eerie part. It's not the same mutation that gives modern humans red hair. It's a different change in the same gene, found in 0 of the thousands of living people the researchers checked. 2 separate human species on 2 separate evolutionary tracks. Both got pushed toward pale skin and red hair by the same dim European light, and each invented its own genetic way to do it. The North was squeezing pigment out of anyone who lived there, regardless of which branch of humanity they belonged to. For a long time, scientists assumed Europeans lightened slowly and steadily over hundreds of thousands of years. Ancient DNA blew that apart, and the latest work blew it even further than the old story did. The early hunter-gatherers who lived in Europe for tens of thousands of years after leaving Africa were still dark-skinned. The famous Cheddar Man, who lived in Britain around 10,000 years ago, likely had dark to medium skin, dark curly hair, and blue eyes, a combination that looks impossible to modernize, only because we've been trained to expect pale skin with blue eyes. Back then, that pairing didn't exist yet. Then came the real turning point, around 10,000 years ago. A wave of farmers spreading out of Anatolia, modern Turkey, who carried lighter skin genes with them and married them into Europe's population. And yet, even that didn't finish the job quickly. In 2025, a team at the University of Ferrara analyzed pigmentation across more than 1,000 ancient genomes spanning 45,000 years, and the timeline they found is genuinely jolting. As late as the Bronze Age, only 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, roughly half of Europeans still had dark skin. Pale skin didn't actually become the majority across Europe until the Iron Age, around 3,000 years ago. That's after the pyramids. After Stonehenge was already ancient. In the 300,000-year story of our species, white Europe is essentially a newsflash from this morning. So what tipped it over? 2 things, working together. First, farming wrecked the vitamin D supply. Hunter-gatherers ate a varied diet stuffed with vitamin D: fish, liver, organ meats, shellfish. Farmers ate cereals, wheat, barley, oats. Dietary vitamin D didn't dip, it collapsed. Suddenly, people were almost entirely dependent on what their skin alone could make from weak northern sun. And if that skin was still dark, it wasn't enough. The pressure for lighter skin went from a nudge to a hard shove. Second, farming packed people together. A helpful mutation in a scattered band of 50 hunter-gatherers might take ages to spread anywhere. In dense farming villages wired into networks of other villages, that same mutation can flood through thousands of descendants in a few generations. Diet collapse plus crowding hit the fast-forward button, which is exactly why the change, slow for tens of thousands of years, suddenly snaps into focus in the last few thousand. Here's one almost nobody notices, even though you've seen it your whole life. In essentially every population on Earth, women have slightly lighter skin than men. Same ancestry, same latitude, same sun. Yet a consistent, measurable gap. It's so reliable that across cultures, lighter reads as a marker of female. Why? Babies. Pregnancy and breastfeeding drain a staggering amount of calcium out of a mother's body to build a new skeleton. And a nursing infant needs about 4 times more calcium than it did in the womb, a lot of it pulled straight from the mother's own bones. To absorb all that calcium, she needs vitamin D, and lots of it. Slightly lighter skin lets a woman's body make slightly more vitamin D from the same sunlight, protecting her bones, her pregnancy, and her child. Evolution tuned the dial a notch lighter for the half of the species doing the reproducing. Even the gap between the sexes is, underneath it all, a calcium problem. While we're here, blue eyes. Every blue-eyed person alive today, without a single exception, descends from one individual. One person, one mutation, somewhere near the Black Sea, roughly 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. Before that person was born, the entire species had brown eyes. Everyone. Then one change appeared that throttled melanin in the iris, and it spread, slowly then faster, probably riding along with skin pigment variants that were already under heavy selection. So something we treat as ancient and primordial, something humans have used to sort each other for centuries, is younger than agriculture, younger than Stonehenge, younger than the tamed horse. The version of humanity we think of as fixed and eternal is, in fact, still wet ink. Skin color, the thing that shaped empires, justified atrocities, and stacked human beings into hierarchies for millennia, is, at its biological core, a UV calibration dial. Nothing more. Your body's best ancestral guess at how much sun protection you need, set by the latitude your distant ancestors lived at, the food they ate, and the star they lived under. Light skin isn't better in any absolute sense. At the equator, it's actively dangerous. More UV getting through, more DNA damage, more cancer, more folate destroyed. And dark skin isn't primitive or less evolved. It's the original setting, the baseline, the default, that everything else is a modification of. If anything, light skin is the newer edit. Dark is the factory configuration, and as the Inuit, the Neanderthals, and 1,000 Bronze Age skeletons all quietly remind us, the edits came late, came piecemeal, and came by a dozen different routes. And here's the deepest irony of all. The same sun that drove some populations toward more melanin to survive its power drove others toward less melanin because they were starving for what little of it they could get. The sun never picked a side. It had no favorites and no plan. It just radiated, blankly, and let evolution do the bookkeeping. We built entire civilizations of prejudice, oppression, and hierarchy, on top of what is, underneath everything, a vitamin D problem, a calcium issue, a folate protection mechanism, a single nucleotide a fish helped us find. We're still evolving, by the way, slowly and visibly, but evolving. The old pressures haven't vanished. We've just muffled them with supplements, sunscreen, fortified food, and food shipped in from every latitude on Earth. We've partly unhooked skin from the job it was built for. The algorithm is still running. We've just changed the inputs, and where it goes over the next 100,000 years, nobody can say. Evolution doesn't send updates. But this much is certain. Every shade of human skin that exists today traces back to one ancient population standing in the African sun, slowly fanning out across an unpredictable planet, carrying, written in melanin, the exact record of every place their descendants ever passed through. Every skin tone is an answer, and the question was always asked by a star,